And that, of course, means that we're starting tonight in the US city of Chicago, where a tearful Joe Biden has addressed the opening day of the Democratic National Convention. The crowd chanted, "Thank you, Joe," with several minutes of cheers, rapturous applause, and sustained ovation when he took to the stage. In a forceful, reflective, and sometimes tearful speech, the president painted Donald Trump as a threat to democracy. He told delegates they were in a battle for the very soul of America, and he paid tribute to the Vice President, Kamala Harris. During the four-day convention, the delegates are due to endorse Ms. Harris as the Democratic presidential candidate for November's elections. From Chicago, Arise international correspondent Faith Orr reports on day one of the Jamboree.
Of the United States, Joe Biden!
It was everyone on their feet as the President of the United States took to the stage to hand over the baton. Joe Biden told the Democratic National Convention that decisions made now will affect the whole world for years to come. He criticised Donald Trump repeatedly and said hate had no place in America.
Donald Trump calls America a failing nation. No, I'm serious, but think about this. Think about this. He publicly says to the whole world, I'm going to say something outrageous, I know more foreign leaders by their first names and know them well than anybody alive. Just because I'm so damn old. But I'm not joking. Think of the message he sends around the world when he talks about America being a failing nation. He says we're losing. He's the loser. He's dead wrong.
The opening night of the convention was full of the party's big names. New York Governor Kathy Hochul, Representative Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, and Senator Chris Coons all urged delegates to rally behind Harris. Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton spoke of her hope that the glass ceiling in US politics would finally be smashed.
There was 2016 when it was the honor of my life to accept our party's nomination for president. And nearly 66 million Americans voted for a future where there are no ceilings on our dreams. Well, my friends, the future is here.
Kamala Harris surprised delegates by appearing on the stage on the first night of the convention. She thanked Biden for what she called his historic legacy.
Thank you, Joe. And looking out at everyone tonight, I see the beauty of our great nation. People from every corner of our country and every walk of life are here, united by our shared vision for the future of our country. And this November, we will come together and declare with one voice, as one people, we are moving forward.
But in nearby Union Park, thousands of protesters gathered to condemn the support given by the US government for Israel's war in Gaza. More than 40,000 Palestinians have so far been killed in that conflict. People here are demanding an end to the genocide in Gaza. They say the millions being sent to Israel would be better spent in the United States to help people struggling with homelessness, struggling to feed themselves, or simply living paycheck to paycheck.
They just need to do a very simple thing: end the genocide, get a ceasefire, stop the bombing that's going on, stop arming Israel with our tax dollars that should be spending over here at home for our Americans, for housing, for infrastructure, for healthcare, education. I mean, the list goes on and on. Us Americans need that money more than they do.
The people here say they cannot vote for a candidate that funds genocide, and that goes for the Republicans as well as the Democrats.
Well, the alternative is either they change their course, Democrats change their course significantly, or we will have to go to, Jill Stein. I mean, a vote third party. I mean, that's where a lot of these people are going to, because it doesn't seem like our message is being, coming across to the Democratic. We want the Democrats to change their course, but if they're not going to, then we have no choice to change our course then.
Demonstrations were mostly peaceful, but some protesters broke through a perimeter security fence, leading to several arrests and police working to clear the area.
So the police are trying to clear this park, but what's interesting is the way that they've encircled everyone. If we can just show you here. If we look around here, you can see the lines of police, and they're circling all around the park. There's only a few remaining protesters, but people are now encircled in this park.
Democratic Party leaders do not want protests to be the overriding memory of this convention. They're hoping it can be a historic event that leads to the election of America's first woman president. Faith Orr, Arise News, Chicago.
Well, let's cross live now to Chicago and get a sense of how day one of the Democratic Convention in the city went. Of course, Arise International correspondent Faith Orr is there, and she joins me now live. Good to see you, Faith. Let's start with Joe Biden. A bittersweet moment for the outgoing president. We could see him wiping tears, couldn't we? And many in the crowd were tearing up too, emotionally caught up in the moment.
Absolutely, Charles. The emotion really began when the First Lady Jill Biden took to the stage. She spoke in glowing terms about her husband's achievements. The couple's daughter then introduced her father. In emotional terms, she said how proud she was of what he had done for America. As he walked on the stage, they hugged, he shed a tear, he was seen wiping his eyes. Now that seemed to really get the crowd going. We saw so many signs and chanting, "We love you, Joe." We saw Kamala Harris getting a bit emotional. We saw Nancy Pelosi getting a bit emotional. So it really was quite a heartfelt send-off for the 81-year-old president.
Indeed, and yet just a month or so ago, most of the party desperately wanted him out. I mean, things change rather quickly in politics, don't they?
Oh, they certainly do. And make no mistake, had he still been the nominee, I don't think he would have had quite such a warm welcome as he got last night. He used his goodbye speech, though, not just to reminisce, but also to look forward, to boost Kamala Harris, but also to attack Donald Trump. He repeatedly called him a liar. He called him a disgrace. He said he was no good for America. If he'd been speaking like this earlier in the campaign, there might not have been so many calls for him to step aside. He was back on form. Possibly that's because the pressure is off of him, who knows. But he did finish up his speech, again on a heartfelt note, saying, "I've given my best to you for 50 years. So very much a goodbye from Joe Biden.
Well, absolutely. And of course, earlier, the former Democratic presidential nominee, Hillary Clinton, who was the first woman to be the top candidate for a major party, also took to the stage. Just tell us a bit about what she said.
She gave a really rousing speech to delegates at the convention last night. She spoke of her loss to Donald Trump in 2016, but said that she had cracked a glass ceiling in becoming the first woman to be a nominee for a major party. She then spoke of her enduring hope that that glass ceiling would eventually shatter at some point in the future. She said that future is now. She says on the other side of this is Kamala Harris raising her hand and taking the oath of office as the 47th president of the United States. So very, very optimistic from Hillary Clinton that Kamala Harris is going to finally break through that ceiling that Clinton just put a few cracks in.
And I mean, you're there, of course, Faith. You put together that package that we saw, which was really very interesting and really took us into what is going on there. I mean, As you look at the proceedings so far, in spite of those protests that we saw in your report, I mean, are you getting a sense of unity in this Democratic convention?
Certainly amongst the delegates and the supporters of the party, very much I'm getting a sense of unity. I mean, I watched two women with Harris t-shirts on last night. They were sitting at a bar, they were watching it on TV, and they were cheering. They were cheering at the TV when there were speeches made, particularly by Clinton and by Harris. So yes, very much a sense of unity. But there is also, you know, the protests, as we mentioned. Police very, very aware of that. But even then, it's not the numbers that the organisers expected. The organisers suggested yesterday there was some 15,000 protesters. The police I spoke to said, no, more like 3,000. I think once we saw the march, which ended in a little bit of unrest, when we saw that march, we were trying to figure it out for ourselves. It was more than 3,000, but it was nowhere near 15,000 people there. So as I say, even those protests, disruptive, yes, but not the scale that some might have thought, certainly nothing comparison to 1968. So it's not sowing the disunity that some might have feared.
Meanwhile, of course, Kamala Harris has surged in the polls. You mentioned that yesterday, surging in the polls against Donald Trump since she stepped up to replace Joe Biden. But the race is still a very tight one, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. So Harris now has roughly 2.9 point lead over Trump. Now, those are the latest and average national polls. I mean, it depends which poll you're looking at. These figures always vary a little bit. She has been marginally ahead of Trump now, although, as you said there, the race still remains very, very tight. Part of the problem with that is that despite her leading the polls on certain topics, for instance, major policy issues like the economy, like inflation, like jobs, like crime, voters still say they trust the Republican Party more than the Democrats. So yes, a tight race, she is ahead, but that can all change.
Indeed, and as you said, they're still very, close, in the polls. Everything, as you said, could easily change overnight. So what are the messages that the Democrats are going to be hammering home this week?
Well, we actually heard some of this last night, and we heard a little bit of a warning from some of the speakers that it doesn't matter how jubilant things are now. They need to use this week properly. They need to have a good week. They need to leave things on a high note, and they have to keep this momentum going. So more than specific messages, it was about the momentum. If they have this momentum, if they have this lead in the polls, it's about how to maintain that. We know that healthcare is something that the Democrats are trusted very highly on. So that is something that they're focusing on. We know on Friday that Harris is going to announce many more policies, particularly around the economy. So we'll need to see how that plays. But it's about using the momentum to announce the policies to try and keep the voters interested in the party and see where things go from there.
Faith, thanks very much indeed. Faith Orr is Arise international correspondent. She was talking to me on the line there from the Democratic Convention in Chicago.